Hello and welcome back to the Schooner Pod. I'm Bobby Howard. With me today, we've got Jameson, we've got Ty, as always. And look, this one's a bit complicated. The Sooners win a pretty massive game, 50-20 in their home Big 12 opener against Iowa State. But this one, it feels a little less clear cut. There are a couple fans who are upset about a couple pretty bad breakdowns, and a couple fans are trying to poo-poo it away because at the end of the day, it's a cover. It's a very solid win. The Sooners didn't look ahead against Iowa State, but we're going to break all of that down and more. I will say, though, if you're looking for Texas coverage, you're going to have to wait a little bit because we are putting a lot into that. We will have our traditional Texas preview. We'll have our state fair food preview. All of that's coming. Just be patient. It will take a little bit of time for us to get that going. We have to kind of take care of business and take out Iowa State. But guys, welcome onto the show. Happy to talk about this one. And Ty, I'll let you kick this one off. What did you think about this game? A lot to like, a couple things to dislike, but overall, I think a pretty interesting performance from Oklahoma.
Yeah, like you said, Bobby, no look ahead podcasting here. We're going to take care of business first. Overall, I really liked what I saw. I mean, Matt Campbell, all jokes aside, always brings his A game against Oklahoma. Obviously, different coaches, different players, different systems that can change, but it seems like he always brings his A game against OU. There obviously were some breakdowns on the defense, but I think the biggest thing that I saw from this one is no one was really expecting a ton out of this OU team this year. I think everyone kind of reasonably expected big steps forward from last year in a rebuilding year. And the big thing that I saw in this game that I think is a really good indicator of things to come is just how much we adjusted at halftime. It seems like, not to beat a dead horse, but Lincoln Riley teams just never adjust at halftime. Look at them versus Colorado this past weekend. But national championship winning teams, not to put the cart in front of the horse, are always, in the past 2 decades, the teams that really adjust after half. And if we can continue to be a team that always wins the second half, we're going to go good places.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was the exact same thought that I had in this game because we can look at it in the negatives. Yes, we had, big play after big play in the first quarter, allowed them to get 20 points really quickly. Yeah, we can talk about the negative there, but how we responded for the rest of the game is, I feel like, a really, really big deal because this was a low-stakes situation that got to test us through adversity. Whenever our defense is not playing up to the par it's had in the first couple games, can they come back and find new momentum and lead a new shutdown for the rest of the game? And that's what they did because it's really, really easy for a defense to get in its head and things to snowball really quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I believe, I can't remember who said it after the game. I think it might have been Jaden. It might have been Jaden Gibson. I'm double checking my likes. Our old friend Josh Calloway it was Eli Letterman brought up a quote on Twitter /X, whatever, that said, someone punches us in the mouth, we finna punch them back. I remember some games last year, we got punched in the mouth, man. I feel like we never recovered last year. This year, I feel like we can recover from anything. And I feel like OU did recover from anything because there were a lot of pretty demoralizing plays that Iowa State did put out on offense. But, like you two have said, the second that second half started, all of that went away. So the ability to recover from the mistakes, honestly, are just that's just as important as preventing the mistakes to happening in the first place. You have to know, you have to be able to bounce back from that. That's the second best thing you can do, rather than just making sure they don't happen. So I know people are probably a little grumpy about it. I get it. It had shades of Alex Grinch, but overall, really, really solid defensive performance overall. And then offensively, obviously putting up half 100 on Iowa State. Very impressive stuff. This is a program that is usually pretty solid defensively. And I think we could just kind of lean right into the offense here, guys, and start with the guy who put on an absolute show, Dillon Gabriel against Iowa State. 3 passing touchdowns, 366 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, 37 yards, then 95.7 QBR. did have a pick. That one was a bit of a goose, but it was kind of
It was below Farouk's fault. If you watch the replay, he does not run the route correctly, and Dillon Gabriel threw it to the spot, and Jalil Farouk ran his crossing route too wide and essentially screwed over Gabriel. Gabriel was pissed at him. So I'm not going to damn Dillon Gabriel for that pick at all. I think Jalil Farouk just did not run a clean route.
That's fair. I haven't had a chance to really, really dive into the film yet. So that's a good catch there. But overall, pretty solid performance. I feel like that was one of the best performances we've seen Dillon Gabriel put on. Really gutty, really solid, just overall performance from DG there. And James, so actually, no, Ty, what did you think about it?
Yeah.
No, look, it was good, right?
Look at that. The known Dillon Gabriel lover now.
Okay, well, no. So there's some asterisks because again, it's about good enough, right? And if it works, it works. At the end of the day, you win the game. You win the game. I think if you go back and watch the tape, right, it's up for debate. But there were two really good deep ball completions that I think against a competent defense both would have been interceptions, like egregiously underthrown. The receiver would just have to stop, and just happen to the announcers. Both times use the term put on the brakes and they'll fly right by. Like in Top Gun, that's generally not how you prefer to throw a deep ball because the defenders are usually the ones that are there to catch it. But really, really good game, using him like he needs to be used. And I think we saw a really complete game from him. And I saw very, hints of really good, really solid offensive leadership that I think is a really good indicator. I mean, he ran somebody over to get a touchdown in, and that's maybe more of an indictment on that Iowa State defender. But it was a really, really solid game for him. And I don't understand at this point people who are maybe still calling for him to be replaced.
No, he looks like he's been there and done that. And obviously we've talked about it all the time with his career stats and, he could become this record holder, blah, blah, blah. No, like legitimately the way he's carrying himself on the field right now, you can tell he's been there and done that. And for a game upcoming with the Red River coming up, you want quarterbacks who've been there and done that and have that composure and lead the offense like you're saying, Ty. And you could see that the way that he was commanding his wide receivers and his running backs and his offensive line. He's the leader on this offense, and I think that's a really, really important characteristic to have.
Yeah, absolutely. That leadership role, because I think we've seen better quarterbacks at OU and we'll see better quarterbacks at OU, but he has that anchoring presence that you really need, especially entering a massive game like OU Texas. And that's good because I feel like we saw him a little shaky against Cincinnati. Obviously he feels better at home, I feel like. But this is the type of performance we need to see out of Dillon Gabriel going forward if we want to see OU really, really, make some waves in the Big 12 and, potentially nationally.
Here's a big question on Dillon Gabriel. I kind of know the answer to this. Blake would get on to me for asking a question that I don't already know the answer to, but is this upcoming Red River game, again, not to jump ahead of ourselves, is this the biggest game that Dillon Gabriel's ever played in?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. This game is going to be the biggest game that the majority of this team has played. I can't think of a player on this team, I guess, other than like a Trace Ford, because the context of Oklahoma State playing Oklahoma is just such a big deal. But I don't know if any of these players have really played in a bigger game than this upcoming game on Saturday.
Did Trace Ford play in that Big 12 championship against Baylor? I don't know. That would maybe that, but yeah, atmosphere
wise, but this is still like a de facto Big 12 championship. This is like a Big 12 championship, either like automatic qualifier, because I just don't see any way, shape, or form the winner of this game doesn't go to the Big 12 championship the way the Big 12 looks right now.
Yeah. I mean, one of them for sure. I think it's a pretty much a lock, I would say. If you win, you're probably going there. Just given, like you said, it's like West Virginia is the only one who I feel like could prevent a repeat.
And you saying that out loud just really says like a lot about the Big 12.
Exactly. The shield is looking a little rusty. They let the riffraff in.
Bring it up Wednesday, and we'll hear a different story about how West Virginia is actually a quality opponent. Should not be underestimated.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
But let's get back just talking about Iowa State. We'll have our Texas talk. But I was really impressed with Dillon Gabriel. Obviously, he should be kind of the leading person for game balls. But let's move on and talk running backs, Bobby, because I think there's still a lot of questions when it talks with running backs, because I think we've seen enough of the sample size, and we were already kind of speculating this last week, it's just they're not going to be that special. Marcus Major is a pretty average running back, and he's just not doing things to pop off the page too much. Yeah, they might break one tackle every once in a while, but we had that one Tawee Walker huge run. I think it was like 60 yards that got called back with a penalty. Mm-hmm. Other than that, our running backs are not really changing like the momentum of the drives. They're putting the passing attack into a position to succeed sometimes whenever they get 4 or 5 yard carries. But I don't think these running backs are going to be any kind of game changer whenever we play big time opponents.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's clear that that's not the case, especially with Marcus Major, who continues to get the lion's share of carries. He had 19 carries compared to Sawchuk's 7 and Tawee Walker's 4. And I believe Ty brought this up a couple of weeks ago, and might have even been last week, of, what you want to see in a running back, what you want to see out of a running back, entering, I can't remember which game it was, but they have to break out big yards, these big runs, and they just don't exist. They continue to not exist. So that's certainly, disheartening. I think we've clearly seen enough of Marcus Major. He's just not. Either one of two things is true. Either Marcus Major is the best we have, and the rest of the room isn't very good, or Tawee Walker. I think Tawee Walker's been pretty solid every time I see it. Mm-hmm. Javonte Barnes is apparently still hurt, dealing with like an injury that has been kind of lingering since summer. So you never really know with that, but I mean, I think we could definitely say that Marcus Major, if he is the guy, this running back room is not very good, and it's kind of a problem.
Yeah, they're kind of there. Again, it's a weird problem to address. I feel like we have sort of the same talking points every week. If they haven't been explosive to this point, I don't know that they will be. We always talk about this OU schedule, again, ignoring next week, but it's not necessarily the most challenging schedule, but I don't think what we have going forward is any easier than what we've already been through. And the fact we haven't seen a lot of these big, obviously we saw one that got called back, but we just haven't seen an ability to create explosive, plays or dynamic plays, or plays that could potentially change the game, or even plays that, an opposing team just has to be conscious of in their game planning. I think, Texas is probably sitting in a room somewhere having the same discussion right now of, how much do we actually have to respect this OU run threat? And I feel like it's not a whole lot. But at the same time, we haven't necessarily seen, huge issues from them. We're not seeing, ball security issues would be, really the main one that you see. They're able to create yardage. I feel like Major for a lot of the game, I think for over half of his carries, they were decent carries, but then he just has these, situations where just he specifically, it's just not there, that ability to sort of create things. So I think we're just in a situation where, again, we have to count on being good enough. And at this point, my expectations for the running back room are just sort of shifting towards 0 mistakes. I'm not expecting much more than 2 or 3 yards per carry, throughout the game. But if we can just not have really any mistakes, I would like to see them take over. And again, some of it is schematic, but I would like to see them being able to take over short yardage a little bit more, because I just don't want Dillon Gabriel having to be in a situation where he has to truck someone over for a touchdown. But that was it. That was my spiel. It didn't have a natural.
No, it's okay.
I thought I froze for a half second.
Just kind of. No,
I thought everyone.
I realized I was out of stuff, and I was like, I just gotta cut it, or I'm gonna go on a tangent.
Everyone was also like not moving for a half second. I was like, oh
yeah,
no.
It was all three of us at once just weren't moving. But I think it says something.
Much like the OU running game.
I think it
just
says
3
something
of us.
Dillon Gabriel.
Nobody's going anywhere.
when Dillon Gabriel's
You
your
can be
second
Marcus
leading
Major.
rusher, like that's not great. That's
No.
DG is a serviceable runner. He certainly has heart, but I mean, that's not great. That's really not great at all.
I've been really disappointed in Gavin Sawchuk. I feel like I had a high expectation for him coming into the season. Like, I think there was, like, in the preseason where I was talking about, I think this could be the guy who could be taking the first snap of the season. Obviously, he had that injury that took him out right before, that kind of killed his momentum. But if you're talking about things that we're wanting from the running back room right now, we're saying we want more explosion. We want more playmaking ability. That is Sawchuk. Marcus Major, we know he's a known commodity, and he is doing exactly what he does. He'll break a tackle or two, and he'll get you an extra 3 or 4 yards, but the big plays is not really his game. Tawee Walker, he's small and he's like a bowling ball, but even whenever he had that long run after with the penalty, he really lost steam about 30, 40 yards through. Like, he was running slower. Like, that is not new for him. Gavin Sawchuk's a guy that hopefully you see they gave him 7 carries this game, even though we thought they were going to avoid and kind of move on from the young running backs, with Javonte Barnes and Sawchuk getting their huge run in the Tulsa game. Hopefully this shows that maybe he can get his momentum going and get some more consistent carries and find a role within the offense.
Yeah. I mean, agreed. And I gotta say, my only idea with this running back room, and it might be a little bit of copium on my end, is that we've just been saving Javonte Barnes this entire time, and he's going to run for 200 yards on UT next week.
That's not going to happen.
But what if it did? You never know.
That is so. I feel like we haven't used the word gooner a lot this year, and I think that's because we've been kind of happy with the way we're playing. So there's not a lot of, I haven't heard much on Twitter of people being really like whiny, or I guess also not being in state. I haven't got to hear the people call into the sports animal afterwards, which I really enjoy. People yelling at Al and Jim, on campus corner. Maybe that's just maybe stop thinking about this, the stupid Gooner fans. But to be honest with you, I think that they'll come out here pretty soon.
Okay, my favorite current Gooner trend has been in the upper deck. There'll be times where people will stand up, turn around, and just stare at the press box to try to be like, "What are you doing, Jeff Levy?" To be like, like Levy's looking down on them and knows that they're disappointed.
I kind of like that though.
They don't even boom. They don't say anything. They just stare.
I like that.
It's incredible. This happened with multiple different people last night, and I kind of love it. Especially in a game where, like, I think offensively, other than the running backs not looking great, it was pretty smooth. So.
Yeah, our passing game, honestly, is our strength of our offense, and it's obvious. And it's getting to the point where we are really spreading the wealth around to our wide receivers. We really need to start putting Nick Anderson as the number 1 outside wide receiver. I don't think he's getting nearly enough snaps comparative to like Jalil Farouk. And I don't want to overreact because I know Jalil Farouk is very talented. But with him screwing up that route and Dillon getting mad at him and Nick Anderson I feel like he's done nothing wrong. Every time he touches the ball, it's like electricity this year. Can we get more touches from Nick Anderson other than this 2-catch 56-yard game that he had?
I mean, it's pure efficiency. Every time he touches the ball, it's magic. I mean, he had that one game against Tulsa where it was like he had 3 catches, 3 touchdowns. It's not to compare Nick Anderson to Randy Moss, because obviously,
oh my God, here he goes,
wide gap there, but it's kind of Mossish, the way he is being used, not in talent. He has a long way to go, and hey, who knows? Sky's the limit. But just in terms of when he's available, that's a touchdown. That's magic right there. And I don't know if it's the way he's being covered or what, but man, he has been showing up in some big time moments for OU. I believe he already has 5 touchdowns this season, which is really, if you look at it, one of the fastest. It's the fastest a Sooner has gotten to 5 touchdowns in a season, given either touches or just touches in general, which is unreal. He's only done it on 17 touches, which is crazy.
10 catches 10
10
catches on the
catches.
season.
That's
That's just
nuts.
ridiculous. 50%.
Yeah, just pure efficiency. So I would love to see him get more because he's been nothing but just like remarkable. And I gotta say, as a whole, this wide receiver room, we had our doubts entering the season. It's been one of our best units by far. Emmett Jones, the work he's done, has just been remarkable. This wide receiving core is awesome.
Yeah, I really feel like and I think anyone watching has probably felt that it's taken a step forward in the past couple of weeks. And I really think it's really down to Nick Anderson, in my opinion. Like when I watch Andrew Anthony, I still see really good things from him. Obviously, Farouk here and there, but good things from him. I think, a lot of people have taken a step forward. Gavin Freeman, for some reason, couldn't think of his name. I can see him starting to develop a little slowly, but I'm seeing development from Freeman. Drake Stoops, coming back. I think he's at 100% now. I think he had a week or two of still recovering a little bit from his little bit of a bang up that he had early on in the season. But Nick Anderson really stepping up. I feel like he's had the most significant improvement. And then, like y'all talked about, and just in terms of converting opportunities to success, 50% touchdown on receptions. If you're talking about 10 receptions, 5 touchdowns is really, really good. So it does come down, I think, to, if you have someone who is converting opportunities to success at that rate, then we just got to look and see how can we get him more opportunities. And obviously, he's benefiting from being sort of a lower name on the depth chart to some opposing teams, or at least has the past couple of weeks. I'm sure, if Texas sees him out there, they're going to have a completely different, oh, this guy's on the field reaction than, Iowa State or people just previous to this development. But yeah, I really don't think that you can overcredit Nick Anderson, his individual contributions to where we feel that this receiver room is right now. Because I think if you removed him from it, we would sort of see a receiver room that's broadly similar to week 2.
Here's my thinking with this wide receiver room, and I feel like I've seen this a lot from OU fans. It's always like Jaden Gibson, great. He needs more touches. Nick Anderson, he needs more touches. Like Andrew Anthony, wow, look at this guy. He needs to get more touches. I haven't heard it a lot about Jalil Farouk yet. Even at the beginning of the season, it's like, where's Jalil Farouk? He showed up. He's still extremely talented. But in terms of the types of opponents and games that we've been playing as of recently, there's really only so much you can do in terms of how many touches you can give to all these wide receivers. So there's going to be some games where you're going to have like this game. Jalil Farouk dominated the receptions at the outside wide receiver position. Then there's going to be some games where Andrew Anthony does it. He's done it a couple times this season. So I think that what we're trying to get might not even be realistic, but I think I just want to see one of the games this season. It doesn't have to be every game. One of the games this season where Nick Anderson's the guy who gets like 7 catches.
Yeah. And we've seen it where there is that variation. Andrew Anthony has been borderline, probably the biggest surprise on offense this year in terms of making a difference from last year to this year. Obviously, he was at Michigan last year, but having him has changed a lot. This is a game where he had 1 catch, and offensively, we were fine. Right, wide receiver wise, we were fine because Farouk, Anderson, even a little bit of Brennan Thompson, which we'll talk a little bit about, stepped up and provided that production. And it's kind of like what Ty, you've been saying about how sometimes being the wide receiver 2 can be helpful. In a way, it's like you have to pick your poison because somebody's going to step up and produce regardless of, coverage. You can't cover everybody. The way OU spaces everything out, there's not a weak link on this wide receiver room at all. It feels like.
Yeah, I think so. I think if you're a team at this point of the year looking to, counter this Oklahoma passing attack, and this is not an attack on Dillon Gabriel, but I think the natural solution, no matter who the quarterback is in this situation, is you just have to figure out how to consistently dial up pressure on a quarterback, especially one that, while he's gotten better at making reads and going down his list of options, still has a bit of a tendency to kind of target fixate on his option number one. At this point of the year, we just have people who can make it happen across the board. I feel like there's a lot of parity and a lot of, across this receiver room. And like you just said, Bobby, cover one and the other ones are going to make it happen and they're going to hurt you. And I think right now that's certainly a big dilemma for a lot of teams. It'll be interesting to see how that's countered going down the road.
For sure. And I know we're like right. I agree that balance is so important. And Jameson, I know we want to move on to game balls soon. But I do want to ask about Thompson a little bit. So this is like the kind of the first time we've seen him all season. What do you think about him? Were you impressed? Do you think he is someone who could be a regular contributor down the line, or was it just like kind of a fun little gimmick?
Yeah, he got his long catch, and that's what we anticipated, kind of, at least I anticipated in the preseason. I know some people have mixed feelings on him because he was the fun new toy that we got from Texas. It was like, oh, great speed. Anytime you can get speed, it's great. The way this wide receiver room is set up and the way he came in a little bit later into the fold, I just don't think he's going to be a guy that's going to be getting, Andrew Anthony type of volume. He will have games this season. He'll probably have one or two more games this season where he gets another deep ball, but he's going to be coming in with the second and third unit. It's fun to see it because obviously whenever you have weapons like him, you should use them every once in a while, especially whenever the secondary is starting to get a little bit gassed and you've had the same wide receivers out. Whenever you can bring in a guy like him who's completely fresh and hasn't had any snaps and you can give him a go route or like slant and go, like a one move go, and try to really press those corners and safeties without have been a little bit tired. That's where I think his role is. I don't think it's going to be like a big volume play for the rest of the season with Brennan.
Yeah. So simply put, just not enough catches to go around. Also great performance from Jaden Gibson. That touchdown was awesome. If you're watching on YouTube, see the little thumbnail. I feel like our wide receivers are just straight up tougher this year.
Oh yeah.
So that's just been really fun to watch. It had shades of the Jalil Farouk touchdown against SMU. So, all right, let's move on to our offensive game balls here. Ty, I'll let you kick us off here. Who are you giving the game ball to?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's pretty easy. It's got to be someone who made things happen through the air. So I got to give it to the guy, 1 reception, 1 touchdown, Billy Bowman Jr.
I love it.
I was like, where is he going with this one? I think everyone's got to pick Dillon Gabriel here. And if you don't, you're trying to be OU hipster where you want to be different. It's Dillon Gabriel. Next question.
Yeah, we don't need to do the thing we've done before where we're like, well,
Jackson
we don't want to be Jackson Arnold because he showed some heart. It showed up and stabilized the offense at the end.
The Oklahoma Pride Award.
Yeah, exactly. Great performance from DG, filled up the stat sheet and, might be underappreciated at times, but he put up the numbers just like Landry Jones, who was actually in attendance.
Don't compare him to Landry Jones.
What
did Landry Jones do to deserve that?
Put up big stats, just like Dillon Gabriel has in his career. They both are men of many big yards and stats.
Big
Andrew
yards,
Jones
big stats,
passed the eye test a good bit of the time.
Yeah, enough.
But they're very different. They're very different.
They are different as quarterbacks, but it's more of a as an archetype of putting up big numbers, but never properly kind of respected. That
yes,
kind of thing. But
yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, DG and Billy Bowman get the offensive game balls. All right, let's move on to our next side of the ball, the defense. So here's the thing. If you look at the tail of the tape, if you look at the stats, good defensive performance. Iowa State was only held to 16 first downs. They were 4 of 15 on third down. OU got 2 picks, including that pick 6, and only, some like 352 total yards. Most of those total yards came on 2 big plays. So that's really like what a lot of people will focus on this one. Some people would call it a bad defensive performance, but holistically, I feel like it was pretty good if you can trim those out. James, what do you
Mhm.
think about it as a whole defensively?
Yeah, so let's just kind of like walk through it. So that first touchdown drive for Iowa State, it was a 51-yard touchdown, and then obviously they had 20 and 14 before that, so they were just moving. And then that next drive where they went and got a field goal, they also had more big plays. They had a 39-yard run right off the bat. And that following drive, we know that was also a 67-yard pass. These are big things. But when it comes down to it, yes, giving up big plays is something to be concerned about. But those are a couple plays amongst a very large sample size of this game. And we saw in the second half, things went back and kind of regressed to the mean in terms of not giving up big plays. Was it a look ahead? Like we talked about earlier, I think it's very obvious whenever you're at home, you're in your own comfort zone, and you're thinking about one of the best college game day OU football experiences we've had as of recently. Next week, damn right these players might have had their shoulders a little bit slouched a little bit and not keened up and ready to kind of play to where it just takes one step wrong and then all of a sudden there's a guy running behind you for a long touchdown. Big plays in a look ahead situation doesn't have me concerned as much if, for say, Iowa State led 15, 16 play drives like we saw last year, where just they would get to third and short and then convert, and then they get to fourth and short and we just couldn't get them off the field. I at least feel like this is a little bit more fixable.
Yeah, no, I'm with you because like those breaks, it's easier to kind of get over that sort of thing. And they both of those big touchdowns kind of felt weird. I don't know if you look at the way that the safeties were kind of playing it. There was one where I think it was Key Lawrence was just like it almost looked like he was reading the football the wrong way and thought the ball was going in one way for a pick and just ended up halfway across the field in a weird spot.
Rocco Becht with his wonderful eye play. I always knew he was a good quarterback.
Yeah, Rocco. That's the thing is I feel like in a lot of ways too the defense kind of got bailed out when Rocco Becht like kind of started, because there were times where Rocco Becht, he was throwing some checks he couldn't cash. That because it wasn't even that it was necessarily a hard throw, but just he a better quarterback could have exploited the defense a little bit more. But Rocco Becht, he was Cinderella, but he turned back into a pumpkin by the time that second half came around for a couple moments. But yeah, just weirdness on those breaks.
Yeah, I think you really, the best way I can put it is sort of we were seemed to be performing pretty well, and then all of a sudden Iowa State showed up and they started flexing at our club, throwing money everywhere. But then it ultimately turned out that they were flexing with money that they got through high interest payday loans, and the interest caught up to them there at the end. But
or maybe some
Jameson,
sports betting.
Yeah, Jameson had a good point though. I mean, or both of you did. It's big mistakes are, I think, less worrisome to me if you don't have a whole lot of them than, like Jameson said, people just stringing together drives. They were ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, statistical anomalies. Obviously, they're not to excuse big plays like that. They cannot happen going down the road with some of the opponents that we have left. But yeah, if you exclude those as outliers, this was a very, very solid defensive performance. And if we can sort of polish up those things that cause those mistakes, I don't think that you can look at this defense to this point. Again, we haven't faced necessarily the best opponents, but I don't think you can look at this defense and say, oh yeah, there's a big critical vulnerability there, or, there's a big potential point of failure there, or something else. Mistakes are going to happen, especially at the college level. And, not great to see them happen, but it was not something that I'm necessarily worried about going forward.
Yeah.
I will say the weakness continues to be I want to get more sacks. It's just as simple as that. Only getting one in this game is just disappointing for me. And I keep saying it over and over, and I'm tired of saying it. But I've already made my opinion on this pass rush. Obviously, it can be better, but I want to see it in the next game. You know, I keep trying to find this silver lining. You know, like early on, I was like, these opponents were very outmatched. So obviously their scheme is not going to be sit in the pocket and try to dissect the defense. All they're trying to do is get quick routes and get ahead. You know, what's going to happen versus Texas whenever they put Quinn Ewers back and he can go through 3 or 4 different reads? What does our pass rush look like then? We've been really good about bringing pressure to the quarterback because we're blitzing a lot through our linebacking position. But can our defensive ends go out and make a big play next week will be a very, very important thing to see, because the defensive end game, although I've been like seemingly content with it, the pass rush I feel like can really go up in terms of our ceiling of this defense.
Yeah, no, I mean, absolutely. Pass rush is a concern. And I think the thing that has been difficult with it is we're struggling to get consistent pressure on teams like Iowa State, Cincinnati, Tulsa. What's going to happen at the Cotton Bowl next week when we have Texas's O-line, which is, as we know from, you know, the amount of the gobs of NIL that has been sent to them, is much, much improved. That is a big time SEC ready O-line. And the game is going to be significantly different. Can you know, it doesn't even have to, this doesn't have to be the game where you have to get a billion sacks, but you have to make Quinn Ewers feel the heat, or else, you know, he can dissect this team. That's just how our defense works. You have to apply pressure, or else it's just not going to be there. And, you know, I think our D line has improved with the transfers, but ultimately you're going to have to throw some blitzes at them if you want to get that pressure, because I don't think D-line play alone is going to be able to do that.
We've been having to play too cute, and I understand Rocco's slippery. He's slippery, but still, like we're gonna have to have a really good defensive game plan called by Venables and crew.
Speaking of sort of defensive game plan, this is a bit of a change of pace, but I noticed this in looking at sort of my homework or my notes for this podcast. This game, if you look at the defensive stats, I felt was a very complete, very team game. Obviously, the tape, you know, can be interpreted in whatever ways. But when you go down and look at just sort of who had tackles, it wasn't necessarily a game where you had 1 or 2 guys. Obviously, Stutzman, you know, leading with 6 tackles, but then a whole bunch of people with 4 tackles, a whole bunch of people with 3 tackles, a whole bunch of people with 2 tackles. There wasn't necessarily 1 or 2 people who were just out there, I think, putting it all on the line like we've seen at OU performances in the past. And I think that's a good indicator generally of just really being able to spread out. I think it also, if you read into it, shows that Iowa State was maybe testing all sorts of different parts of this defense and everyone was sort of holding their ground. So I think just looking at the stats, I felt like it was a pretty complete defensive game. I'm curious if y'all have thoughts there.
The really big thing with it is what we've seen this year. It's the turnovers. Getting turnovers has been so important for our defense in its momentum. Starting off the game on a pick 6 is so big because we struggled at the beginning with the big plays. We've already talked about that ad nauseum. Getting that pick 6 right at the beginning was a big deal, because if Iowa State would have started off without, you know, they got ball first, and instead of the pick 6 being a touchdown drive, we would have been fighting from behind each time, instead of kind of having the momentum in our own hands. And now I understand I'm playing butterfly effect right now. Is there a scenario where if they go out and they get a touchdown instead of a pick 6 on that first drive, our defense already kind of stops relaxing and plays harder and we don't get this 20-point burst from Iowa State? Absolutely. But I think getting turnovers like we had in the first half from Gentry and Billy is just so big, and a thing that OU fans have been crying for. And Alex Grinch is probably watching from afar, like all mad, seeing how often this secondary is getting picks.
Yeah, and I feel like the difference between this year and last year, and Brent's brought it up before, a lot of people have talked about it, but the difference is they're actually converting on those mistakes. You know, last year we saw so many times the ball just right in our hands, drop it, or, you know, being in position to make a big play and not going through with it. And just changing that one little degree has made a world of difference for this defense. Absolutely. I fully agree.
Yeah. I think weirdly enough, Jameson, with your butterfly effect, I think that would have forced Shout out to Bobby and his take, but I think it would have forced, OU to go back on the sideline and just sort of take the restrictor plates off Javonte Barnes and let him go, tear it up, because he's our secret weapon who we've just been keeping in our back pocket.
Javonte Barnes, unless he gets 100% healthy, I don't know what you're expecting here, because that dude had no agility at all. He was
sandbagging.
Yeah, it's but
that's what Texas wants. That's what we want Texas to think.
Well, okay.
He's the second coming of Adrian Peterson.
You know what? We talk about it every year. There's always some kind of hero that we always expect for in Texas. Obviously, it wasn't the case last year, but you never know. It could be anyone. But kind of like putting a bow on this game, because the defense, it's kind of hard to talk about other than those big play drives, because other than, those plays that like really broke out on Iowa State, it was just a sound game. People were in the right spot, making good tackles, forcing Iowa State into third down and longs. And I think overall it's just a very average game that's really, really hard to talk too much about like we had in the past.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, it was just solid. I mean, you can go through and be like, oh yeah, Danny Stutzman, 6 tackles, 2 solos, 1 TFL, 1 pass deflection.
But is that really impressive? Because that's just, that might even be less than what we expect from him.
It's just what he does. It's like a very okay game, and he led the team in tackles. You know what I mean? And
he stubbed his toe. Did you see that? That
was funny. Yeah, that scared our section quite a bit when he went out with the injury and said it was a toe stub.
Was it like a shoulder thing that he went out for?
It looked like a shoulder or an arm.
Okay, so he just had a stinger and he was just joking around about it. Because whenever he says, "Oh, I stubbed my toe," that makes me think, I think he might actually be hurting. He might not be injured. There's a difference between injured and hurt. If he's kind of like degrading it by saying, "I stubbed my toe," it makes me think that he feels it a little bit. Maybe has some pain there, but am I overanalyzing this too much? Because if it's just a stinger, it'll be away and go away pretty quickly.
I mean, I think it's Danny Stutzman. He's probably just messing around. I'm not too worried.
You might be reverting to work mode. You might be trying to solve the case here based on the evidence that you have, instead of just looking at a press conference.
Yeah, especially one from Danny Stutzman.
Yeah, I'm grasping at straws, that's for sure.
Maybe a little bit. I did have a slide for Peyton Bowen because I thought he had a solid game. And he also, obviously not defense, but we tend to lump special teams in with defense. He had another punt block, second in 5 games. Great. That was excellent. The guy just continues to prove to be like absolutely just, invaluable. You have to have this guy on the field at all times. Not on offense, but I'm sure he would not be bad on offense if you really had to put him out there. He's been just pure electricity, and I don't mean to talk about the same guys over and over again, but Bowen, just great performance.
No, he deserves to be talked about, because the amount of momentum you get from a play like a punt block is just so big. Yeah, interceptions, fun. But I feel like punt blocks are one of the most momentum shifting plays. And having 2, like you said, in this graphic right here, in 5 games, this one was completely different. The other one, like he got there, and his fingers got it. This one, he could have just grabbed that ball from the kicker's leg.
Kind of wish he did, because it ended up Trace Ford jumped on the ball, yeeted it into the end zone like a cat with like a little toy ball of yard.
Exactly what it looked like.
Just pounced on you.
Yeah, the thing is like it's interesting to me, because I feel like interceptions generally, in my opinion, are sort of a bigger swing towards you, because in a pump block situation, 99% of the time you're getting the ball, regardless of the outcome of that play, versus an interception, that's a big momentum swing. So I think, but at the same time, it's just a completely different effect. When I think about interception, I think about like when I go to Sonic and they remember to put the mint in my bag, right? It doesn't happen all the time, but I appreciate when it happens and it completely changes my breath after the meal. Right now, a pump block, that's more like when you order onion rings at Sonic, but then you also get like 1 or 2 tots, like end up in the
that's
bag
a
somehow.
big deal.
Right? That's great. Yeah. Which, and honestly, are tots better than onion rings? Not when you're ordering onion rings, but it's great. It doesn't have, it happens very rarely, and it's
How
a
often
really
you get
exciting
onion
thing
rings
when
from
it occurs.
Sonic?
It's been months.
Well, I mean, that's
But-
not too long ago.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. How often do you get pump blocks?
It's
Mhm.
I'm with you on that. I think the rarity is like what
That was my point. That was
Yeah,
essentially why I was
exactly.
saying it's a bigger deal, because like interceptions, they happen almost every game. There's not a lot of games out there in college football where you don't have one interception in it. Punt blocks, it's not that common.
Think about just how mundane the punt is. You know, it's
Mhm.
it's one of those where you know it's going to happen. Usually a fair catch, nothing really spectacular is going to happen. So when something like that does, you don't see it coming, and it's just, your head just, alarms going off like, oh my god, this is awesome.
It's
Yeah,
like
it was a cool experience in stadium last night. People were pumped until Trace Ford yeeted the ball. Which again, safeties are great, but also Trace, buddy.
I think that you're describing it like the cat and yarn is so perfect. I don't know if you came up with that or saw it somewhere, but is that you, Bobby?
So I mentally thought of that in the stadium. I was like,
okay, that is perfect.
Yeah, I very much. If someone else wrote it too, then great minds think alike. But genuinely, I thought of that in the stadium. First thing to come to mind.
I will go up and mention once again, if you really look at it, a safety is the best possible thing, because that's the only way that you can get points and then also immediately get the ball. So
I did think that when it happened.
That's
in a
fair.
better, it did result in a bit of a better outcome, because we essentially turned the play into 9 points for us versus just 6 or 7 or
Did we score on that next drive? For sure. Let me make sure.
Or was that the drive where we missed the field goal?
I don't know, because I think that's after we kind of started turning the corner. Is how I remember it.
So
no, I thought the pump block was pretty early.
We got a field goal on the next play, on the next drive.
Okay. So
and can we just talk about our special teams, because we've talked about it a little bit this season, but Schmidt, his kicks that the went in still look horrible, like they are just absolutely wobbly messes. And then how bad is Plaster having to change? He's going rugby style now just to hope that he can get it farther down the field. That dude has no leg. What's going? Have we heard anything about Elzinga? In terms of I heard it was a 50-50 or on the depth chart in the preseason, and now it's Plaster continues to not show much. Can we not trot out a different punter, especially early in this? I just don't understand it, because Plaster, his leg is tiny little
not good
chicken leg. Yeah, it's nothing.
Yeah,
here's one.
Bad.
Here's one for you guys. I think the Dillon Gabriel excuse applies to our special teams. Do we have bad kickers, or are OU fans just exceedingly spoiled by who we've had for the past couple years in general when it comes to kickers, that now that we don't have Jimmy Stevens or Tressway or Money Cut, you guys are going to throw a fit even though we have decent kickers? I want to replace. Where's the backup kicker? Well,
no,
he's not doing as good.
I'm not upset about your theory.
Spoiled OU fan. You're a spoiled OU fan.
It's a bad
You've
theory.
had NFL level talent in that position, and now you're throwing a fit when you have
that. It should be the
talent.
expectation, but Dillon Gabriel's talent is close to it, but it isn't.
And
ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Stevens is a good kicker.
This is about kickers, and you see how defensive they are about Dillon Gabriel. It proves my point.
Zach Schmidt, let me tell you something. It says a lot about your confidence in a kicker by not looking at their stats. It's, what do you feel like? What is the emotion going through you whenever he sets up for a 35-yard field goal? 35-yard field goal should be guaranteed. We should have no worries in the world. He goes up for a 35-yard field goal. Are there doubts in y'all's brain? because there are doubts in
course.
mind. Because whenever he missed the 36-yard field goal, he set up, and I'm like, that should be a gimme. But there's that still that I feel like tightness in my chest whenever he goes up to kick because I don't have confidence in him.
You shouldn't be surprised about a miss from 36, but
I'm mad after it, but still, like, I had this kind of inkling that something bad could happen.
Yeah,
for sure. And it is a worrisome thing too, especially because imagine those, situations where, very frequently, I think, and especially with the new clock rules, we're seeing a lot of games that are coming down to sort of last couple minute drives, which I think is maybe one of the ideas because that's been a fairly prevalent thing in the NFL for a while. And just not having that option or not having that reliability definitely changes things, because it could come down to a situation where we have to kick a game-winning kick, and it might be a kick that he would have made, but because he's been so inconsistent throughout the year, we say, you know what, we're going to go for it, and then we end up, not getting the touchdown or something like that. Stuff definitely plays into it, and I think kicking more than anything else, you want it to just be as close to a lock as possible when you throw them out there.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. Yeah, that is what the kickers are there for. So take care of business and not be talked about. But here we are talking about them. So that's how you know they're not good. But do we want to let's wrap this up with a defensive game ball. James, I'll let you kick this one off. What do you think?
It's Billy Bowman. He got in the end zone. And other than that, like I said, this defensive game, there weren't a lot of I think you could really pick it apart and find some tiny little small heroes amongst everything, but everyone just kind of did what they were supposed to. Other than Gentry Williams getting an interception, there weren't too many flashes of players wow, that guy didn't play too much, and I was really impressed with it. It was more so everyone was kind of par for the course.
Agreed. And I mean, so I can't remember it was a podcast on the Prairie. There, some of them were talking about how nobody really gives Woody Washington credit. Because he has kind of a silent game defensively. And we have a lot of guys who will kind of have those silent games. And Woody,
he's been definitely one of them.
He's been great. And we haven't talked we've barely mentioned Woody Washington on the show, but he has been remarkable, locking folks down. He's been great. But yeah, game balls. Look, we can be on occasions a bit of a dumb boy podcast, and we forget about that at times. So at times you have to pull yourself back and recognize, some of the work being done in the trenches. Woody Washington, shout out to you. But yeah, no, it's Billy Bowman. Got a pick six. It was great. Set the tone for the whole game. It was wonderful.
All right, Ty, you got something crazy for us?
A rare both offensive and defensive game ball. You would have guessed it was Travis Hunter, but the true both way player, Billy Bowman.
I would also like to put a bid in for Dillon Turner-Yell game ball.
Oh yes, of course. That's a guy. That's a guy who just does everything.
Once again, much like Bobby's sort of his last talking point, guy you don't really talk about a lot lately. But
Dillon Turner-Yell, guy grinded it out in the Broncos still, I think.
Oh yikes! Yeah, I think that actually might.
They won today.
I know, but it doesn't matter. They were playing Chicago. Chicago is they're trying to get both top 2 picks in this NFL draft. So
it's bad. The Bears are bad, man.
Yes, don't you worry. Denver will have their time in the sun again. This is not their time to celebrate.
No, they're pretty bad, but
they let Justin Fields throw all over them, and Justin Fields can't throw worth a lick. Yeah. But this isn't an NFL podcast.
Not an NFL show. We don't talk that too often. But anyways, all right. We don't have any final thoughts on this game. Oh, Matt Campbell.
Oh yes, I completely forgot about
timeouts. What?
Yeah, and the fans were saying he was on the hot seat, and he was yelling at fans too. Walking out of the tunnel, you can tell it's really still getting to him. It wasn't just that one time. Now it's 2 times that he's yelled at fans. And whenever they yell back at him. Ty, as the expert of Matt Campbell dynamics of this podcast, do you think it's coming down to where we won't see Matt Campbell as the Iowa State coach next season?
I don't know. I mean, it's an interesting situation because it's just both sides have played their cards so terribly. Because at the same time, like you're Iowa State, like who? Not trying to shit on Iowa State, but who wants that job? Like, who are they going to get to come in there? I don't really know that. Maybe they'll like hire Aranda or Dana Holgerson when they get fired. I don't know.
That's
I
a
mean,
great
it's like
plan.
who would go? Yeah,
Oh
but
my
who would
God.
go to Iowa State? Like, it's not a desirable job. I don't think,
No.
especially with the Big 12 is just getting flooded now with teams that sort of fill their similar niche. Like at least they had that little niche of like we can just kind of be a plucky little give people trouble team, and now that's the entire conference. So yeah, I don't know whether he gets let go or not. Um, there's no good outcome for either party. It's beautiful to watch.
I gotta say, I don't think Iowa State's gonna fire him. This is a program that had 5 bowl wins before Matt Campbell, or sorry, 5 bowl appearances before Matt Campbell came in to the fray. Campbell's led him to 5 already, and that includes a New Year's Six game. So he will have a way longer leash than I think people think, just because of who Iowa State is. That being said, Ty, I think you have finally been fully vindicated on the Matt Campbell is a coward statement, because I gotta say him punting on the 50,
4th and
but
5.
then deciding to use all 3 timeouts down 30. What are we doing? What is that? Is the most performative bull junk I have ever seen, because the game wasn't like just in the game.
Heard bull junk before.
You haven't been listening. Okay, Coach Prime says it all the time. So
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah,
I haven't
it's
been watching Prime's show.
fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, Prime mentions it here and there. I almost said the real thing, but sponsorship friendly. It's garbage. He doesn't care about actually trying to make a risk or do something that turns out wrong, but he'll definitely do some performative stuff that makes it look like he's gritty and they're trying. He doesn't care. He's scared.
He's got to be checked out.
Yeah, he's checked out. Maybe he was trying to cover the spread. As we know with Iowa State, that could be a possibility that they cared about the line, but you never know. I will say one last thing. Iowa State, you played very well in that first half. You had me scared after my wrestler heel kind of moment in the weekend spread. Fortunately, I repented by calling out the fact that I jinxed OU, and the second that happened, everything worked out better. So I kind of reverse jinxed myself. So good on me there. But I would like to say we're going to miss you. You've won 7 games against us in 100+ years. But you know what? I think you're definitely not going to miss us. So.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I know. I was just saying we need to move on and essentially cut off this podcast because we've got so much content coming y'all's way. And I know Bobby will kind of have his spiel here, but kind of just for thoughts for the rest of the week. We plan going live on Tuesday, or we'll talk about what we think Oklahoma and Texas, the football game, will look like. We'll break that down more in depth than we usually break down, our regular weekly opponents, because we've seen a lot of Texas and we really know what we need to do to win this football game. And then one of my favorite episodes of the year, and that's really fun to listen to on the way down to Dallas, if you're doing it, our kind of fair preview of how to do things the right way, where to get your corn dogs, where to get your tickets, where to get your beer, how to handle like getting to, obviously Ty is our, he wants Dart to get our sponsorship on this podcast. So we are going to tell you all that in an episode on Tuesday as well.
Yeah.
Don't forget the weekend spread on Wednesday too, because we're still doing that.
Weekend spread, always great. Always fun making those picks. But yeah, we definitely have to, the how to OU Texas pod, one of our favorites every year. That's always a blast. And, plenty of cool food to shout out and talk about. We'll talk about the Big Texas Awards.
Shout out Beer Barn.
Shout out Beer Barn. If you know, you know. we're not gatekeepers here. We'll let you know
Mhm.
where Beer Barn's at in that episode. But
we should do a OU Texas State Fair gatekeeping episode where we're just like, oh, there's this one food. If you guys knew about it,
It's
really
put it behind
it's
a
really
paywall.
good.
There's this
It's a
one way.
really good
There's this
corn
one
dog.
way to get there. There's this one way to get there. If you guys knew about it, it'd change your day.
You don't
And
go
then
to
we just move on.
Fletcher's because the Fletcher's corn dog's super overrated. You shouldn't sit in that long. Go and just get the normal foot long corn dog. It's the same thing. And put some ketchup on it too.
Ooh.
You know, everything's gonna be great.
The point of the state fair is to arrive as late as possible. You'll just waltz right in. It'll be no problem. But no, like that would be a funny show. But yeah, we're going to be getting into that on Tuesday, I believe. So pretty pumped about that. And obviously the game. Look, if you're watching live on YouTube, which, always fun to add it in. It's undefeated versus undefeated. First time since 2011. So a massive, massive OU Texas, as big as it's been in the past decade or so. So we're so thrilled to get into this and just can't wait to dive in to all this. And yeah, I mean, the content will be just content galore. This is Christmas for us. So we're pumped. But yeah, for everybody listening live, thank you so much for your time on our, for checking in, listening. Always appreciate that. You could be many places on your Sunday night, but you spent it with us. So
Could be watching Zach Wilson throwing touchdowns right now.
Is he? Damn.
He threw 1 yard touchdown.
Well,
Dillon Gabriel could do that. And you guys would be like, see, I told you he was good. I told you he was.
I got to go watch Taylor Swift,
scored a
guys. Let me get off this podcast now.
But
I need to see how many times they showed her.
Oh, God. Well, if you're watching live now and have not subscribed, make sure to hit that subscribe button. Give us a like on this video. And if you're watching or listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast, make sure to hit us up with a subscription there as well and rate us 5 stars. We are 5-star men. We haven't mentioned that in a while. We had to remind the viewers, 5-star men. But anyways, until later, till Tuesday. Have a great kind of 2 days anyway. Have a great week. Boomer Sooner beat Texas.